In October 1973, the deafening roar of global commerce simply went quiet. Massive American cars were abandoned on highways, and bustling factory floors ground to an unnatural halt. The cause was thousands of miles away. During the Arab-Israeli War, Arab nations enacted a strict ban on exporting crude oil. Overnight, those miles-long lines of stranded cars and desperate rationing signs became the defining image of a global panic. The economic damage was immediate and widespread. In the United States, a global superpower found its economy teetering on the edge of collapse. In developing nations like India, the large imported Buicks and Impalas that had navigated city streets quickly disappeared, replaced by severe energy shortages. For decades, Western powers had built their infrastructure on the assumption that cheap foreign energy was a permanent guarantee. The 1973 embargo proved that this flow was actually a geopolitical valve, controlled by a handful of nations capable of freezing human civilization in a matter of hours. It is easy to assume humanity has always run on this liquid, but our deep dependency on underground crude is relatively new. For centuries, lighting the night required a desperate, bloody struggle on the surface. If you wanted to see after dark in early America, you might literally dry out a salmon and set it on fire. In places like Ireland and Scotland, locals hunted seabirds called petrels, dried their bodies, and used them as makeshift candles. By the 1700s, that desperate hunt had scaled into a massive monopoly. The United States whaling industry dispatched armadas to harvest whale fat. It became the fifth largest industry in the country, turning millions of gallons of biological fat into lamp oil, lubricants, and perfumes. Global dominance goes to whoever controls the most efficient energy source. The whaling monopoly was highly profitable, but left the door wide open for any inventor who could pull a cheaper alternative out of the ground. In 1846, a Canadian geoscientist named Abraham Gessner refined coal and bitumen into a clear, highly flammable liquid. He called it kerosene. It burned bright, it was easy to transport, and crucially, it was 15 times cheaper to produce than whale oil. Gessner had the perfect product, but he lacked scale. To mass-produce kerosene, manufacturers needed a massive, reliable stream of raw, unrefined petroleum. Enter an unemployed railroad worker named Edwin Drake and a blacksmith named William Smith. In 1859, Drake secured funding to travel to Pennsylvania and do something that got him labeled Crazy Drake. Instead of skimming oil off the surface of creeks, he and Smith used steam engines and cast-iron pipes to drill directly down into solid bedrock. On August 27th, at a depth of 69 feet, Smith and Drake reached the reservoir. Their makeshift wooden derrick proved that petroleum could be pumped from the earth in industrial volumes. The surrounding area of Titusville exploded into Oil City. Within 3 years, United States oil production skyrocketed from a few thousand barrels to over 3 million barrels annually. Drake's success provided the blueprint for a century of extraction. As Pennsylvania's refineries flooded the market with kerosene that cost a fraction of biological fats, the whaling industry began a steady, terminal decline. As the 20th century approached, the American monopoly forced European powers to scramble. To secure their own energy independence, European nations spread aggressively across the globe, searching for their own vast reserves. In 1908, a British geologist struck liquid wealth in Persia, modern-day Iran. The discovery led to the creation of the Anglo-Persian Oil Company, a British monopoly that began extracting and exporting immense volumes of Middle Eastern crude, with the vast majority of the profits flowing directly back to the British government. It did not take long for Iran to realize its natural wealth was being aggressively siphoned. The ensuing geopolitical blowback culminated in 1951, when Iran nationalized its entire oil industry, seizing control of the British assets and igniting fierce international conflict. A slightly different dynamic played out nearby. In 1938, the American company Aramco drilled into the desert of Saudi Arabia, hitting a deposit that would dwarf almost everything else on the planet. Saudi Arabia went from one of the poorest nations on earth, relying heavily on dates and religious tourism, to possessing nearly 267 billion barrels of proven reserves. The sheer scale of the discovery turned an impoverished desert into a mega-wealthy superpower. The random geographical lottery of ancient decayed organic matter had hijacked the global map. Wherever those hydrocarbon deposits happened to sit, international borders and power dynamics were entirely redrawn for the next 100 years. By the 1950s, the countries sitting on these massive reserves realized they had a severe economic vulnerability. Overproduction and ruthless competition to export oil were driving prices dangerously low, eating away at their profits. Their solution was a cartel. In 1960, 5 major producers met in Baghdad to form OPEC, the Organization of the Petroleum Exporting Countries. By deciding exactly how much oil to pump, they effectively connected their individual national pipelines into a single master valve, designed to choke supply and stabilize prices. Controlling that valve allowed OPEC to weaponize the flow of global energy. When they restricted supply during the massive price shocks of 1973 and 1979, the cost per barrel skyrocketed, dragging Western economies to a grinding halt. But any system relying on artificially managed supply is highly fragile. The ultimate proof of that fragility arrived in April 2020. As the COVID-19 pandemic locked down populations, global demand for fuel vanished. Simultaneously, a stubborn price war between Russia and Saudi Arabia flooded the market with excess crude. The combination pushed oil prices into a mathematically absurd freefall, bottoming out at -$37 per barrel. For a brief moment, producers were paying buyers to take the oil off their hands. It exposed a harsh reality. The modern global economy is tethered to a highly volatile, manipulated supply chain that can crash the second demand behaves unpredictably. The petroleum era funded immense progress. It built our modern infrastructure, pulled nations out of poverty, and, ironically, saved the whales from total extinction. But the externalized costs of this addiction are escalating rapidly. The extraction and transport of crude oil leave permanent scars. From massive pipeline leaks poisoning local drinking water, to thick slicks coating containment booms and suffocating entire aquatic ecosystems, the catastrophic environmental toll has reached a tipping point. The damage is forcing humanity to look for a cleaner, more sustainable lifeline. The historical rule remains unbroken. No energy monopoly lasts forever. Just as kerosene replaced the whale hunt, cheaper technology eventually overwrites the old system. We are watching the succession happen in real time. Look at Norway. Despite sitting on vast, highly lucrative oil reserves, the nation is actively abandoning the internal combustion engine. Citizens are instead plugging into charging stations, seamlessly integrated right into their city streets. The era of black gold built the modern world, but its economic benefits are being overtaken by its liabilities. Humanity is already preparing for the next great energy succession.